and thank you for bringing some information and a bit of a heat wave from wherever you are, or a cold wave. Today, we will be talking about 10 tips to improve your proposal budget. A little bit about us as MZN International. We work with NGOs to help them be better funded, to assist them in improving their operations, to deploy smarter strategies. And as an organization, we are a social enterprise with many of our services subsidized. One of the things we enjoy so much talking about lately is that our training in person is back, and we will actually be delivering an in-person training in Amsterdam in the early February on writing winning proposals. So we look forward to upcoming opportunities for online and offline engagement with you. My name is Hande. I'm a consultant with MZN International, mainly focused on fundraising, proposal management, and access to different funding opportunities. And my colleague Jules will be assisting today in case of any questions, queries, and facilitation of the overall webinar. So as a quick summary about what we will be talking about, we will touch on the rights and wrongs of budget preparation, quick look into donor requirements and how to meet them, and we will touch on the value of a good budget. Give or take, the presentation is about 13 slides. We will try to make it interactive so that you can also share your feedback and questions. We also, for that reason, have a Q&A at the end of the session. So for that purpose, Jules, are we using the chat box or the Q&A to gather the questions?
Thanks, Hande. We will be using the chat, Q&A function. So we do tend to miss the questions that are in the chat box. So if you could please pop them in the Q&A, and then we will get through them at the end of the session or during the session.
Am I missing any housekeeping?
You actually did a very, very good job of all the housekeeping. Just a note, the slides and recording will be shared after the webinar via email or our website. So we always put our webinars posts on our website under past webinars, as well as every single webinar is recorded and shared on our YouTube channel. So if you ever miss any information, please do just check our website.
Thank you, Jules. So let's get started. What are some of the challenges we commonly know when it comes to budget development? Most of the time, we face the problem of not having the content of the proposal in time, ready, prepared in time, so that we can create a detailed budget. Sometimes we are not able to identify clear unit costs or benchmark the costs within the organization, within our own organization. We may face challenges when working with different team members, when they do not respond to queries on time, or when they do not provide what information is required from them. Indirect costs are always something to tackle when it comes to creating budgets for donors. And sometimes the templates provided by donors can be way too complicated to complete. But these are the familiar problems we face when preparing budgets for donor-funded programs. And given a good identification of these problems, how would we end up with a budget that fails the proposals? So quite a lot of reasons or factors can lead to a failed proposal. One of these is the budget. Your budget is a strong factor when it comes to evaluating the proposal. And some reasons why you can fail when it comes to the budget are, as you can see on the screen, the calculations. Sometimes we do not check, double check, triple check when it comes to how Excel helped us with calculating the costs that are in our budget. We may not have read very carefully or remembered during the preparation phase what our budget limitations were. So in case we exceed or stay under the budget limitations that were identified by the donor, we set ourselves to lose even before we get started. If we provide inadequate explanations when it comes to why we actually require the requested funding, so the donor, because they are going to fund and financially support the implementation of our project or program, would like to know where the money will go and whether there's a justified explanation of the costs they are seeing on paper. Lack of clarity takes away points when it comes to evaluating your submitted documents. As previously mentioned, we may face some challenges when it comes to use of different templates. And if we do not provide a clear explanation on how we calculated those numbers, what kind of a formula or unit price, unit value we used when it comes to calculating different items in the budget. Another reason why a budget would fail is if we provided high indirect costs, high organizational costs, despite any indication given by the donor in the guidelines or in the terms of reference. One other thing we will touch a bit more in detail in the upcoming slides is the issue of contingency costs. There's always a good reason to leave room for a little bit of maneuver. There may always be some unexpected expenditure when it comes to implementing the project. But when you put it in your budget document as bulky contingency costs, then the donor would not like to fund something that is quite vague and not very clear. One of the top tips we share with our partner NGOs when it comes to preparing budgets is to always remember that the budget preparation is equally as important as writing the technical parts. Simply, you wouldn't leave an activity description mid-sentence and send it in the technical proposal unfinished. So when it comes to budget preparation, we have to show it the same tender love and care we do to the technical proposal. That is why one of our 10 tips for better budget preparation for proposals is to also treat the budget development as a project in itself. So how would you do that? From day one, take the budget development task as seriously as the technical proposal and have a meeting with the proposal team. Ask questions about the amounts, the requirements, whether there have been any agreements or discussions with the donor. And is there understanding of the size of the budget? Do we know our limitations? Do we know our minimums, maximums? Do we have an idea about how much, or if any, co-funding will be required, and where that co-funding would come from? Study the financial requirements of the donor and make sure you have the correct templates and information. When you are unsure about the information provided by the donor, make an effort to reach out and ask any questions. Like we do with the technical proposals and project plans, have your own timeline for the budget development that would go in alignment with the proposal preparation. Ensure that that timeline is in line with the rest of the bid requirements. And taking into account the approval procedures in all of our organizations prior to submission, make sure you leave enough time for the relevant people to review, to provide feedback, and for you to revise and finalize the relevant budget documents. And of course, don't do all of this by yourself. Inform all relevant stakeholders of the information requirements and the timeline. In other words, if you require information from your colleagues in your department or in other departments, make sure they know what is expected of them, when it is expected by. Getting the templates right, this is always, a bit of the trick, because as long as you are familiar with the donor template, if there is one, then it's easier for you to place all the required information in that template. When you are working with a new donor and you are not familiar with their template, then take the time to understand and study what can go wrong or what can be missing when you are using such template. If the donor does not have a template, then make sure you use Excel or Google Sheets to develop a budget and build in the formulas to avoid calculation errors. When you are designing a template of your own, then ensure it involves all the details your donor would like to see. One mistake which is often made and can easily be prevented is using the correct currency. Check and double check the terms of reference, the guidelines, the information provided by the donor when it comes to which currency they want the budget presented in. You can always prepare the documents, or you can always make the calculations in the currency you find most easy to use. But make sure that when the time to submit comes, you are using the correct exchange rate, refer to that exchange rate in your documents, and you remove any information that is not required. Number 3 of the 10, making sure that the content is clearly reflected in the budget. What does this mean? So, very, very basically speaking, when we are preparing a proposal, we have 2 key components. One of them is the technical proposal, which is pages of information explaining why we want this funding. What kind of activities are we proposing to implement? What kind of results, KPIs, all the storytelling we had to do. On the second component, we have to explain what that story costs. So we have to make sure that the proposal content matches 100% with the numbers. We have to make sure that they are telling exactly the same story. So if in the technical proposal we are talking about a set of activities, and in the project budget somehow there are missing actions or maybe more requirements than is available in the technical proposal, then we would be showing them two different stories. And we would lose points for that. The budget would fail us. There are different ways how donors want the information, so we should take those into account. They might want to see different methods when it comes to how the project activities were costed or how the headings were designed. Are we using phases of the project, or are we using an objective or outcome based documents when it comes to calculating the budget? And we should keep in mind that we need to present them the way the donor would like to see them. One of the questions we get often is whether to prepare budgets by activity or use the line-by-line budget system. So technically speaking, it's your party. You can use which method comes easily to you. If there's no donor template, make your choice and stick with it. There's no right or wrong way of doing it. When it comes to using the activity budgets method, then you are required to divide your proposal into work packages, divide them into group of smaller activities, and make sure that your costs identify the value for money when it comes to calculating how much funding will be required for each of the activities. One of the weaknesses when it comes to using activity-based budgets is there might be expenses which can be forgotten about, and therefore the advantage of line-by-line budgets is when you categorize all expenses depending on category, such as the human resources, stationery, activities, procurement, etc. They are easier to read, easier to assess, and when it is a good practice to create your activity budgets first and then see what else is missing to tick all your boxes. Number 5 out of 10, we are almost halfway there. One of the things we forget doing during proposal preparation is stopping, taking a breath, rereading, and asking ourselves questions. So as soon as we think about a budget, we need to ask ourselves a series of questions, one of which is, who will do the work? The answer to this question is going to tell us whether we have the internal capacity to implement it, and if not, are we going to require external support for the implementation of this project? And if we require external support, how much is this going to cost us? How long is this project going to take? So I need to take into account the number of work days for the people employed in the project, and maybe take into consideration any festivals and holidays to match them with the work plan. What kind of supplies and or equipment will be required? Do I already have the machinery, equipment, vehicles, stationery that will be used for this project? Or will I have to procure these. And if I have to think of a procurement, then do I need a procurement plan and a threshold when it comes to purchasing items above certain amounts? And where will these activities take place? So are they easy to get to? Will I need additional transport? Do I need to plan for logistics? Will anyone from my organization, partner organization, or from the stakeholders need to travel throughout the project? So what kind of travel and accommodation requirements do I need to plan? And if I have to talk about travel budgets, then do I need per diems, incidentals, or are there any rules and guidelines from the donor when it comes to travel budgets? Will there be a requirement of supervision, evaluation, oversight? And if so, are these covered by the budget or do they require additional funding? So the reason we need to stop and ask ourselves these questions is because each of these have costs. And if the costs of these items are not covered in the budget, then the donor is not going to pay for them. And because they were forgotten during the project preparation phase, it will be quite a financial difficulty for the organization to get over. Number 6, one of our very often nightmares when it comes to both calculating and finding out where to place on the budget templates. Categorizing the expenses. Are we talking about direct expenses or indirect expenses? And does the donor allow indirect expenses to be covered by the funding? Most of the time, the donor would have a policy, hopefully provided by the guidelines or the terms of reference, and you would be expected to follow such guidance. And most of the time, the structural, managerial, and logistical support indirect expenses are essential to complete the program, and the cost of these are important for the financial health of your organization. Therefore, when you are drafting your budget for a program or a project, be sure that you consider all expenses relevant to the implementation. Make sure you categorize them appropriately and keep in mind that if the donor does not cover them, someone will have to. Asking the questions, making sure you consider all the expenses, and using the best estimates, using the market research correctly is helpful, as it will limit the financial challenges later in the project. Therefore, being thorough during the proposal preparation, budget preparation phases are critically important. Reading, rereading, and doing the double checking, triple checking on the requirements. Most of the time, most of us are working with strict deadlines and on more than one proposal at the same time, which means it is only a human to confuse or mix up what the requirements are for one donor and the other. Therefore, going back to the guidelines, going back to the terms of reference and rereading what is required by the donor is very important. Some of the frequent errors are exceeding the project budget, so you kind of blow it before you even get started. If you have not stated the currency, are you submitting in euros? Are you submitting in dollars? Are you using the local currency of the country of implementation? There is no way of the evaluator to know it unless it is clearly stated. And the issue of indirect cost recovery, make sure you check the policy and do not deviate from that. If the policy of the donor when it comes to indirect costs does not work for your organization, then you may want to consider not going for that donor. You can look for different donors where you are more aligned in terms of policy. So these are the three easily avoidable errors in project budget preparation. Please avoid them. As I briefly mentioned before, we need to be pretty careful when it comes to calculating and putting contingencies in our proposal budgets. So it needs to be clear what it holds, because you also would not like to give someone money for a reason you don't know where they are going to spend it. So if required, calculate a contingency amount for separate items in the budget. So make it part of the specific categories. Because at the end of the day, every item in your budget must be justifiable. When you are using bottom line percentages or bulky contingency items, it is both difficult to justify and also monitor during the implementation period. I cannot emphasize enough the importance of using extra pair of eyes for the double checking and triple checking prior to submission. We all have our internal formal approval processes to make sure that all the formulas and calculations are correct, but it's best to ask for the assistance of someone maybe who has not seen the proposal before, so they can really be an external and fresh eyes on the documents. Triple check that all the donor requirements, percentages, explanations, that they are all correct. Triple check that all the information in your technical proposal and your financial proposal match exactly. One of the most frequent errors that is made is we make a slight adjustment to the budget at the very last point, and the same change of numbers, figures, or justifications is not reflected to the technical proposal. So the donor, the evaluator, sees two different figures. Make sure that the final number is added correctly back into the narrative proposal. So at the end of the day, make sure your story is 100% waterproof. And number 10, where we have to emphasize the value of a good budget. So even though most of us think of the budget as where we talk about how much the project is going to cost and what the items expenses are, it is actually a important tool to communicate with the donor. It does say a lot about our preparation and our capacity as an organization. When you prepare a solid, strong proposal budget, it does give you, it does give the donor information about your core salaries, your overheads, infrastructure costs, and when you provide this information openly, it shows your openness in communication and willingness to collaborate. And when you show calculations and figures that are good value for money, when you can justify why the reason you chose specific calculation or specific materials for the implementation of your program, then it shows to the donor that you are looking for the best way, the most efficient way of spending the available budget. Being able to prepare a well-designed and informative budget also demonstrates your ability to efficiently manage the finances, because having designed the budget gives you the first-hand information of what is involved in the program and the required guidelines on how to monitor it afterwards. One of the reasons we emphasize so much to read, reread, and ask questions when necessary is to make sure everything is compliant with the donor rules, guidelines, and the information they want to see. When you comply with such information and the donor reviews the costs at every level, then it will show on your documents. Turning the story to the negative side a little bit, if you cannot prepare the budget for your proposal, then what is the likelihood of the donor to trust you with the funding of the project or the management of the project? So the good budget also shows skill of the organization. So we just reviewed all 10 topics for the importance of creating a good proposal budget. And we look forward to any additional topics you think should have been presented and have affected your preparations when it comes to project budget preparation. I leave the floor to Jules.
Thank you. Would you mind pressing play?
There we go.
This is just a little intro into our training courses. I'm not sure if the sound is coming across. While you're watching the little video intro, I'm afraid the sound doesn't seem to be playing. We just wanted to let you know that we have our in-person training courses scheduled for 2024. They range between 2 and 4 days, and they are really taking place across the globe, from London to Berlin to Nairobi and even to Panama City. So please do take a look at our website, MZN International, under events and training courses, and you can see all the dates and the information on our in-person training courses. There are some last-minute spaces available in our Amsterdam training course, which is happening on the 5th of February. So if you do have a gap and are able to get to Amsterdam, please do join us today, or join us then, and it'll be all about right-winning proposals. So more on what Hande is speaking about. So we look forward to hosting you in Amsterdam or in the future. And this is just a summary of our 3 training courses. So please do take a look at our website. We have a fantastic training manager, Nicole, and she's available to answer any questions. And our upcoming webinars, very exciting new topic that we are launching into this year. We might do a few webinars on this, is using AI and proposal writing. So we all know AI is a hot topic, and we are now utilizing this within our services and showcasing how best to use AI. So we look forward to seeing you there. We've already nearly got a full webinar on that. So if you have not registered, please do make sure you do. And then the next webinar post that is Building the Future NGO, Embracing Agility, Entrepreneurship, and Digital Innovation. So now that we can all work digitally around the world, we need to embrace this and become stronger NGOs by having an agile workplace. So sign up for that as well.
That is actually one of my favorite webinars because it keeps reminding us how the world has changed in the last couple of years when it comes to our working habits and how we are learning to be more flexible when it comes to our work-life balance.
Thank you. Hande, shall we jump into questions? There are two questions.
Yes.
If anyone else has any questions for Hande, please do pop them in the Q&A. Oh, we have three now. So Isabella, welcome, has asked, is this a problem if you need additional funding for some of the critical activities not covered by the proposal? If it is not guaranteed or does not have an identified source, how do you manage this problem?
Thank you for the question. One of the critical parts of co-funding when it comes to preparing your proposals is you would prefer to know how that where that co-funding will come from. And when you do not have an exact answer for this, then you need to consider different fundraising opportunities. So are you going to use your own resources? Will you be meeting other stakeholders? Will you raise funds through campaigns? Or will you be writing other grant applications? The trick when it comes to not knowing is also if the donor asks for this information. Sometimes the donors do want to see how the entire program is going to be financed. How you can manage this problem when it comes to your specific question is calculating the required cost ahead and having your additional resources available to reach into. So you can use the divide and conquer method and create your own pool of separate funds and make sure that their timing is aligned. I hope that answers Isabel's question.
Thank you very much. Phil has asked, can you please give examples of direct and indirect costs?
A quick example would be direct costs are, well, as the name goes, directly relevant to the implementation of the project. So if there are activities and activity costs, then they are your direct costs. Indirect costs are more on the administrative side. So your office costs, your administration costs, your project management costs, which do not directly affect the day-to-day implementation of the project, but are required to be funded, so that your organization can continue its practices, are part of the indirect costs. Sometimes the donors may not want to fund the indirect costs, so it's helpful to identify what is allowed in the eligible funding and what is not.
Great, thank you. Hamid has just asked, how would you better elaborate on overhead costs?
I believe my answer just now should be adequate for that.
Okay, no problem. Sorry. Phil has asked again, what is the difference between the investment in budgets and proposals by mid to large consultancy companies, and similarly for small NGOs and the larger ones? Should we have a full-time proposal writers and budget teams?
Oh, that is a tricky question. If your organization submits proposals round the clock and it is a full-time, then it becomes a full-time responsibility, and therefore we would recommend at least one person whose key responsibility is to identify the opportunities and write those proposals. There is always the possibility of doing this externally, asking for support from project writers. But again, at the end of the day, the people who know your projects or your strategies, your priorities the best are within your organization.
Thank you. Someone just asked, and it was on the question before, it's a quick answer. Indirect cost is operational cost, question mark.
Yes.
Great. Elaine has asked how to make a template simple and easy to understand. Join our training course.
Well, we do have quite a lot of training opportunities when it comes to writing strong proposals. One of them also includes the templates and how to make it easy to read, user friendly. But for the sake of this conversation, read your technical proposal. Think about every item you would see as a expense for the implementation of that proposal. Write it all down and break them into categories. You will see how Excel will also be helping you in creating that template.
Great, thank you. We have our last question because we are almost up with our time as well. It was just a question, can we share an example of a good proposal budget? It'll be helpful to visualize everything that's been covered during the presentation.
Well, unfortunately, we are not at liberty to share budgets as such, but you can always reach out to us for a quick conversation about different donors, their templates, and how best to use them.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Hande, for such an informative session. I'm sure everyone has learned a lot. We look forward to your next webinar.
Thank you, and thank you for facilitating, and greetings everyone. Hope you have a wonderful day and week ahead.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.